right, we're live. It's very late Sunday night. Hi, Jake. How are you?
I am ill, but not as ill spiritually as the
Are you
San Francisco
physically ill?
49ers. I
Are
am
you?
physically ill.
Oh, what do you have, buddy?
I did radio for a week for the first time, and I got a case of the uh, throat soreness
Oh, right.
and congestion. It's
It's a
December.
tough gig. That's why they pay so poorly. Um, let's do some radio here. Modern day radio on the YouTubes. Niners have lost 73-20 the last 2 weeks, Jake. 73 to
You know
20.
what my favorite stat is?
What's that?
They have the same record as the Dallas Cowboys.
I let off my column with that. Do they have any shame, Jake? I could have written thousands of words about the peculiarity of this game, about how deeply bizarre it was. Not in the least bit because Fred Warner had cramping in both of his forearms. Things that I've never heard before. Just weird, bizarre game. Obviously never in question the outcome. And
No.
I could have done that. And then I listened to something even more bizarre after the game. And I'm not talking about the other great 49ers content here on YouTube. I'm talking about the post-game press conferences where I heard person after person come up to the microphone and imply that next man up, we still got a lot to play for. We still got a chance. We feel like we have what we need to get it done. What on earth are they talking about? When I say, do they have any shame? This is what I'm talking about. Either they are lying to themselves or they're lying to us. And that's the unconscionable part. You guys have now gone out and played the Green Bay Packers and the Buffalo Bills, two teams that could very well be playing for the championship of professional football come February in New Orleans, right? You have lost by a combined score of 73-20. Josh Allen threw a touchdown pass to himself tonight. They
Did you
clowned
see he got points for both throwing and receiving?
That's incredible. He should try it more often. He'd be even better in fantasy football. I'm telling you right now, if the Niners don't know that they're cooked, it's unsalvageable.
They
you think
do.
they know?
Dude, Kyle, this is the first time Kyle admitted. I think it was Branch who asked him, and he asked him about having fight, and Kyle goes, "Well, we're not as good of a team as those past teams, so
You don't say."
that's kind of how I look at it. We're not the same team at all. We still got a lot of fight. We basically suck.
Jake, they're a bad football team. We suggested this weeks ago. We were scoffed at for being hyperbolic and Overton window movers. And that Chiefs game was the foretelling of all of this. Because you watch that film and you say they've played a good football team, right? There's a lot of mediocrity. There's a lot of 8-8, 8-9, 9-8 these days. Wish we still had an even number game. Regardless, there's a lot of that. The whole league is built for everyone to be 8-8. And yet, every year, and the 49ers have been part of this clique, every year, there are a couple teams that break through and are excellent. And the stars have lined up for them because they either have an exceptional quarterback or they've just put together a hell of a roster. I know what a bad football team looks like, and I know what a good football team looks like. And when they have played good football teams, they have gotten their teeth extracted from their skulls with pliers.
Yeah.
They have played three outstanding football teams. Green Bay, and that's even fringe. Green Bay, Buffalo, unquestionably, and Kansas City, unquestionably. And this is a down year for Kansas City. And in each of those games, they have gotten worked over. So the idea that they're just a couple of tweaks away, folks, is it's not comical. because that would imply that they're in on the joke. They cannot. They seem to think that they're still entitled to play for the Super Bowl, Jake.
No, I don't think they do think that. I think what they think is that they have to play the rest of the season and that they know the rest of the NFC West is not great. And so
Yeah.
they're like, all right, we might as well try. But I think the reality is they all know. And what I did with my column is I just went through and I was like pointing every single thing that was wrong with this team. Went from start to finish in the first half of the
I
season.
can't believe you got done writing.
I didn't cover everything, but the first half of the season, right? It's like all the protections and like, the failure to separate against man coverage and the defense is, okay, but not great. All of that stuff. And then it's like, all right, get to the bye week. We don't believe you're going to be a serious team, but maybe McCaffrey comes back and solves it. Oh, Christian McCaffrey came back, and what do you know? This team is still not serious and not a legitimate contender. And why are we surprised? And so
He
they
looked
tried to do
sick
it,
tonight.
and then he injures his PCL and is probably out for the year. And
Yep.
that's where we're at, where this team is old and injured, and tried to sell that it was 2021 and 2022 when they didn't go to the Super Bowl, by the way.
Right. Well,
But
it's very reminiscent of this team right here, the San Francisco Giants. Every year we do this, and obviously expectations much higher as it pertains to the 49ers, a team that deserves high expectations given their status the last 3 years, making the NFC Championship game and in one case winning it. 4 out of the last 5, too. But the Giants, every Giants season, save for 2021, has recently been defined by having high expectations and then just slowly lowering them as the season progresses. Like, hey, I think we can take the Dodgers. And then that delusion dies. And then you go, I think we can beat the Padres. And then that delusion dies. And then you go, you know what? I think we're better than that one died. Well, at least we're better than the Rockies.
Dieter, they signed Ha-Sung Kim.
Did they?
Maybe from some reporter.
I liked Grandpa Joe pardoning Hunter Biden today during the game. No one's going to be looking.
Oh, that is funny. I didn't even know that happened.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Regardless, the idea that this team, who is such a trademark example of a bad football team, they put their worst film together when they play the best teams. Bad teams play bad in big moments. The NFL is built for parity. Bad teams play bad in big moments. The Niners are so bad they don't even get big moments anymore.
Correct. I want to go to this comment from Anthony because this is something that we referenced, I think, last week, and I've sort of taken an issue with, is that the Niners, it was the edict from Kyle to say, all right, we would have been, what was it, 8-2. That's what they said. They would have been 8-2 except for 3 plays. Well, 1, you didn't make those plays, so
the
you're
ones
not.
That counted.
2, in order for those 3 plays to matter, you had to fuck up so spectacularly in so many other ways that that's not a legitimate argument. Also, it's a little disingenuous, I think, to go to your players and be like, guys, I get it. You're trying to be like, we're actually a good team. You're not. You're trying to, I guess, instill some
bad
sort of
teams
sense of who you are. But if you have to say that, shoulda, coulda, woulda, you're already cooked. Because that's a mentality that I think is kind of a loser mentality.
That's 100% right. That is 100% right. It is just trying to maintain this semblance of, actually, we weren't wrong. Everyone else was wrong. The universe is out to get us. But we weren't wrong. We showed up and everyone got their money and lost their hunger. And it just played with this general sense of entitlement that we'll just cozy on up to the Super Bowl in New Orleans because we're entitled to it. And what's happened in the big moments? They've choked it away against the Rams. They choked it away against Arizona. They made moments against Seattle, but that wasn't like a tight game. That was just like a backdoor cover energy. Then, Dallas, no big moments there. Tampa Bay, I guess they played well in those big moments. The only memory I have of that game was Baker Mayfield stiff-arming Nick Bosa. I mean, like, did they play? Yeah, sure. Okay, cool. let's count that one up as the exception that proves the rule. Then Seattle, big moments. Here we go. Let's collapse again. And then, hey, season's on the line, you guys. The entire game's a big moment. You got to go to Green Bay, curb stomped. Hey, can't go 5-7. No coming back from 5-7, guys. How about we go out there and give it an old college try? And they're like, well, it's snowing, so guess we can't do anything here. I want to bring up a couple of things here. Okay, so Fred's credit to Fred. He's been gutting it out. George Kittle has been playing in vain this entire campaign. You're down your highest paid guys, your top 2 highest paid guys on both sides of the ball, in Bosa and Lenore, and now Trent and Ayuk. Those are your highest paid guys. I know not on the cap, but those are your biggest contracts. I need to bring up, though, I mean, Debo's cooked. He can't move left or right. Typically,
correct. Debo can run in a straight line. He can run a little bit sideways when he's running full speed and curving, like on that one kick return. But like juking, no.
If he was playing Canadian football or like arena football where you get a running start through the line, like maybe he stands a chance. He just needs the rules to fundamentally change in order for something good to happen here. But they've already stopped running the ball with him. The one great run play, I mean, they had a bunch of really good run plays early, don't get me wrong. But once McCaffrey went out and things got simple and they were getting their ass kicked, they did have one great run play where he did, man. He did. One great run play where it was the Garendo touchdown, right? Well, it wasn't Debo who was in the back. They put Pearsall in the backfield. So they don't run the ball with Debo anymore. You know what else they should stop doing? Throwing screens to Debo, because it's a waste of everyone's time. It's
also in a game like this, where the hardest thing to do is to get going. Like if you can get downhill, it's great, but you need some short area quickness, and you need some sort of like first step, second step, and go. And that is not Debo at this point in his career. He still has utility. But like he looked good on those kick returns going in a straight line because he got a full head of steam, and it's hard for anyone to block on defense or stop anything.
He averaged 34.5 yards on kick returns. He had 4 catches for 20 yards with a long of 7.
I mean, he's barely a receiver at this point. I'm just, it's point blank, period. Like he's
a $20 million kick returner.
I talked to Greg Cosell this week, and we were talking about Debo, and he's like, "What do you guys think Debo is?" He's like, "Debo is a schemed player," and which obviously we all knew, but like that's just somebody who just watches the tape and is like, Debo is only a player that you can scheme open. It's going in a straight line. He can function, but.
Well, at least he fumbled tonight, to make sure that it was a terrible game overall.
The fumbles their comedic timing tonight was unbelievable. Brock Purdy, here's the thing. A lot of people ripped Brock for like the small hands, cold weather, and I'm like, bad weather, and I'm like, okay, I'm not necessarily sure if that's accurate. Whatever. Like, I don't know that I disagree.
He's never won in bad weather.
I'm not saying he's a good bad weather quarterback, but I'm like, maybe it's been overblown, whatever. I just want to see how he does this game, and then he just strip sacks himself.
11 for 18 for 94 yards.
He had 94?
Yeah, 94. There were a couple nice throws, like the one to Jennings, the deep out route. He ripped it in there a couple times. I mean, the only way it could have been better on the comedic level was if Kittle had fumbled the ball directly to the Bills on that third down play when they were deep in their own territory and they just ran a screen to him.
Dude, the hook and ladder from Josh Allen just going, oh, I'm just going to do this, and Amari Cooper just shoveling him the ball.
This is what I'm talking about. Do they have any shame? Like, go up there and be blunt. Like, we don't have it, and everyone is playing for their jobs. Yeah. And I need anybody, to lead by example and call this team out for being shitty. Right?
Yeah.
I haven't heard that yet. I haven't heard anybody say that this team is shitty. And ultimately, if you want to be on this team next year, I'm talking about somebody who has a contract and wants to be here. This would be a great opportunity for Deebo Samuel. I mean, George Kittle, Brock Purdy, somebody, and say, I'm here. Fred Warner would this carries weight because this man is
I
playing
mean,
through injury.
Fred has said they are, what they've done. They haven't. He hasn't.
They've
I
danced
know. I know.
around it, and it's
You're
all
right.
these sort of caveated things that if you want to read between the lines, you can see it, but he's never actually calling anybody out. How about publicly you call out your team for playing like shit in big moments all year long and acknowledge, hey, we're not doing anything, we're not going anywhere. Drop the fucking cliches and the 1 week at a time and the next man up, and ultimately come out here, Kyle, Fred, anybody, and say, I'm going to be here next year. I'm going to play my ass off. And if you want to be here, I need to see you play your ass off.
Yeah.
But everyone's effort's been great. Everyone's doing great.
I don't know. Maybe that's been said behind the scenes.
I
I want to
get
get to
that
this.
sense.
I know. I want to get to this comment
Yes.
real quick from the Iman Report. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Time to wave the white flag, shut down anybody that's hurt, and move on to 2025. Go the Philly route. Bring in experienced coordinators. I think that's all on the table for this team.
Oh,
I think
Sorensen's
they're
done.
going to look at Sorensen. They're going to look at Schneider. I think they have to. I think it would be irresponsible not to, because Sorensen, you give him the benefit of the doubt, whatever. At the start of the season, you're not sure what he does. He's probably not as bad as what he's been said, and also he's not shown anything for you to go, oh, he's been really impressive, other than these like younger guys, being good in the secondary.
Right.
So from that perspective, yeah, I know. But the 12th man thing, once you have that, that's like malfeasance.
Yeah.
And then you go, all right, obviously Kyle doesn't want him to, do much. It's that creative. That's, I think, his nature. But even with that, the defense just has gotten demolished, and they don't have the dudes, but he's not done anything schematically where you're like, all right, we have to keep this guy around. Special teams has been a disaster. They also don't have the dudes. But like at a certain point, if you're a great coordinator, you do something with it. So I think they will look at different coordinators. I think the best case for this team is to lose out. I don't think that's what will happen. I think they will fight and probably get I don't know. Who cares?
Well, I suppose if your two options, and legitimately it's like, well, one side, it's, oh, we win, we're going to win out and like make the playoffs. That ain't happening. Okay. So then your alternative is what? Like, what are you playing for then? And I suppose the argument is draft picks. I would like to see some semblance of competency down the stretch, right? I do think that there's value in putting good film together, particularly after the last 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks. Hell, when was the last good film they put together? Was it Thursday Night Football, Seattle?
Third quarter of the Cowboys game.
Yeah, right? Like that wasn't even a full game. It was 3 quarters of dick around and that. So I want to see I want to see, not that it would mean anything, but just on principle, an ass whooping of the Bears, which I'm not saying is in the cards at all, but I'm saying that would say something to me, not about this team making the playoffs or doing anything, but ultimately it would say something about, okay, there's still some fight here. Kyle still has some control here.
Yeah, that matters.
That matters to me. That matters to me because you are now everything is about 2025 now, and that includes playing young players and thinking about where you need to make changes, but also it's about, okay, who on this roster right now do we want to keep around? Because no one's entitled to a job in the NFL year over year, even guys who just signed big contracts. The Niners can absolutely, not that they should, not that it's the most prudent thing, but if you can they're going to cut Deshaun Watson. They cut Russell Wilson in Denver last year. Like, you can cut massive amounts of money and live. I don't know if you'll be living good, but there is no contract that's uncuttable in the NFL. The two most ironclad contracts in the league, one has already been cut, and the other one is about to get cut. So,
yeah, I think I don't know. I think the problem is, as we've talked about, right? They're already playing all their young guys, so there's not a lot to figure out. I guess the questions you'd ask are like, all right, what do you do at center? I think you have to get rid of Brendel, probably.
I thought Brendel actually had a good game tonight.
All right, so did most of the offensive line in
the offensive line looked as good as this might have been the best offensive line game of the year.
Their left guard, Ben Barch, did great.
He did.
Yeah.
Can we
But
address
you're right. Everybody's kind of playing for their jobs.
Can we address the Kyle OC thing? I think that there's this notion that, oh, Kyle needs to drop being an OC so that he can focus on being a head coach. Why are you suggesting that Kyle Shanahan stop doing the thing he's objectively good at to do more of the thing that he objectively sucks at? Like, why are you this is like saying Steph Curry needs to stop shooting threes because, we need more mid-range shooting on the Warriors. Like, he is an objectively good play caller. It is very difficult to call cool plays when you have shitty players. They have shitty players. Now, I will say that Kyle is holding on way too long with Debo, right? That is unquestionably something that Kyle has to wear. But when you're dealing with an offensive line that you can't trust, maybe he holds on to guys too long. Banks should have been benched. Today's the clearest example as to why. Jennings should have had a bigger role from day one. It's ridiculous that it waited this long. They use Kittle like that. They overused McCaffrey. I don't know, one way or another. When McCaffrey's on, as we saw today, he kicks some ass. Like he's a sweet player. We saw it all last year. Then again, he has 2,000 touches in his career.
Yeah, and they did to this point with both Debo and Ayuk. They overvalued both of them, and they said, "All right, give us 2 firsts for Ayuk," and then they almost traded him for 1 first, if I recall correctly.
Yes, it was a. I can't tell you, but it seemed as if Baltimore had matched their price, and they were in deep, like, okay, we're not taking any more calls. We're just talking to Baltimore. Yeah. I do like this. I don't know if this is all-time comedy, like if this is like a great bit, or if this is a serious thing. Can't judge players with one game. I'm sorry. We're in December. I'm looking at a calendar. We've been talking about the same things since July.
I mean, all this has been pretty clear. Again, in my column, I went through it. It's like you have a lack of off. I think things that need to be reevaluated by Kyle are the way they run their offense, specifically on third and mediums. That's something that's like a tactical thing that's been an issue that defenses exploited, and they didn't really adapt to. Put Brock in a bad situation. I think is part of the reason Brock has been inconsistent all year. As far as the OC thing, I think people are caught up with the OC title. I think the reality is he probably does need another brain in there that he trusts. And that's something that we've talked about is he's lost a ton of coaches. Lost Bobby Sloak, Mike McDaniel, Mike LaFleur, Clint Kubiak, a bunch of guys over the years that he's been able to have good dialogues with. And I do think that's cost him. I think the obsession with the OC title is a little bit of what's the word? It doesn't really matter exactly what the title is. He just needs somebody in there.
It's exceptionally
It's semantic.
simplistic.
It's semantic. Yeah. Because he just needs another brain in there. Like Chris Foerster, he really trusts, but like I don't know if he's really innovating with Chris Foerster. And Foerster's also like really detailed with the offensive line and doing both of those things without like another young guy. Clay Kubiak is like the only guy that fits that mold. I don't know if he's the guy. They need somebody else in there. The OC thing is whatever, but they do need Kyle needs more help, and he needs coaches that he can trust and bounce stuff off, and they can go in the offseason and reevaluate where this offense is at and where the evolution should be.
When you lose the amount of brain power that is now fueling the rest of the NFL, when you lose the amount of quality staff, and it's not just the first guys that Kyle and John brought in, the second wave and a third wave of staff. And when you're constantly playing into February, or at least the end of January, every year, it is exceptionally difficult to replace it. And I don't know. I ultimately think it comes down to your team sucks. Like you don't have the talent. You're injured, and Kyle is an ideologue as opposed to a pragmatist, so he doesn't do well. This is why he doesn't care about special teams. Special teams is strictly pragmatism, right? You have to make the best of what you got. That's not how Kyle does it. Kyle has full control of a roster because he wants to build a team to fulfill some sort of idealistic mandate that he has in his head on what an offense should be. And when one thing goes awry, and this is not a new issue, when they lose one player from the perfect offense, be it Ayuk, be it Debo, be it Trent for a week, any one of the Kittle, when they lose one player, it all goes to hell. Okay? It all goes to hell because Kyle can't, he'll just drop it entirely instead of trusting the backups. The other issue, and again, you have to give some deference here, is that he usually has shitty backups because they've built a roster with very highly paid players and they've drafted poorly, meaning that the players that aren't paid highly aren't very good.
Yeah, a lot of this season is whipping in the draft.
Ronnie Bell was on the team until week 13. What?
They made a lot of bad personnel choices in the draft. They paid Javon Hargrave. It's tough. It's tough. They paid a lot of money to a lot of guys on an aging roster. This is a fair question, and I think the reality is Kansas City, one, has Andy Reid and Spags, who've been doing this forever, and two, they have one of the greatest, probably two quarterbacks of all time, and Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. And so they've built up a defense and drafted well, and they have a stout interior of their offensive line. They're super physical. And so they're dealing with all the attrition, and they've looked kind of like shit this season. But what happens is their defense is tough enough, they're well coached enough that they can bring teams into deep waters and hold on until the fourth quarter and say, all right, Mahomes is going to dink and dunk to Kelce down the field for the final drive, and we're going to win.
Yeah,
because that can work for us, and they don't have to blow teams out. So that's the reality for KC.
They've had the same defensive coordinator since 2019. Okay, that matters. He has full autonomy of the defense. Yes, he has lost coaches, but he's not getting another head coaching job. I don't know if he's even interviewed for another head coaching job since he came to Kansas City. He had an offensive coordinator in Matt Nagy who did get hired, went to be the Bears head coach. He's never getting hired as a head coach again, so he came back. He had Eric Bieniemy, who couldn't get hired as a head coach because he was terribly disorganized and kind of
other reasons that people don't want to talk about, even though they are very publicly available.
Feel free to look those up as well. But he can't get another head job anywhere, and so he's there. Now, Andy, it should be noted, is in his 70s. You know, Andy Reid ain't a spring chicken here. So he's also a little bit more. He was born in 1958. Sorry, 66 years old. I'm adding years to Andy Reid. Apologies.
Come on, man.
That's a dickish move on my end, and I'll put in my penance. But this is a guy who has been doing this thing for a long time. A long time. He doesn't have anything to prove to anybody anymore. Kyle has everything to prove. If nothing else, to his father, who has 2 Super Bowl championships, and there's some issues there. So the idea that, Andy Reid does it, if only you had a circumstance as good as Andy Reid's. If only things lined up the way that they lined up in Kansas City. In fact, this is the harsh reality that the Rams deal with as well. They constantly get their guys poached. This is the reality of Green Bay to a degree. They're getting their guys poached. If you have success, you are going to have your coaches poached. And honestly, we look at, the team that's coming to town next week, Chicago. When they hired Matt Eberflus, you go, oh, that's interesting. But, he's a good defensive coordinator with the Colts. And then they didn't fire him last year. And they draft Caleb Williams. And you go, oh, that's super weird because pretty much par for the course now is that you want an offensive head coach to go alongside as a play caller with your franchise quarterback. That's pretty standard practice these days. There are exceptions to the rule, of course, but you really want that. You want the offensive play caller to be your head coach because if your offensive play caller isn't your head coach, guess who's going to get to be a head coach if you have a sick offense? Like it's me and Steve Young talk about this on KMBR all the time. This is just how it is. So the idea that Kyle, again, would give up the thing that he is objectively good at, and I know that it has not been good this year. I also have 6 other years of very clear evidence that he is very good at this. The idea that he should drop it and just do what? Hang out in meeting rooms? Do what is the implication here?
Cultivate a culture, Dieter.
Is the implication here that he should go be the Super John? Is the implication that he should be Nick Sirianni?
Maybe.
If that's the implication, you might as well fire him. Sirianni, if he doesn't win the Super Bowl, is getting fired. Like, what are we doing here? I want to be clear about it. When I say that everyone's playing for their jobs, I'm not implying that everyone needs to be cleaned out no matter what. I'm saying you better start getting a track record of success going now so that it's easier to start up next year, which is the exact inverse of what the Niners had, which is they ramped it all down and then they could never get it going. You need to start getting momentum for 25 going now. And Kyle absolutely is going into a 25 season with a lot to prove. I'm not going to say he's on a hot seat or anything. Now, if we're in the same situation next year as we are right now, then absolutely, we're having that conversation then. Because at no point would he be justified in holding on to this job. If he can pull it, this is why it's important that they start winning some games now, so that going into next year, it's not so obvious that Kyle's coaching for a job. You go, actually, they pulled it together last year. They were just super injured, but there was some good stuff late in the year, and who knows?
I don't know. I don't know if it matters if they pull it together. I think if they get fucking battered, you're right. I think they need to be slightly competitive, and if they lose, it's whatever.
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm saying is I don't agree with you that it matters that much to set that tone for next year. I do think if you get bullied by the Chicago Bears or some other teams down the stretch and you just get waxed down the stretch and you're still playing your starters, that's a little worrying, right?
Well, what's
that's
remaining
a little
of
bit
starters?
That's a little bit of like, what are we doing here? Is anyone bought in? So I simultaneously disagree and agree with you.
That's
in
fine.
The sense that
a lot of people do.
I think competitive losses are okay, and they probably need to win 1 or 2 for their mental health's sake.
I would just like to see this team actualize for a game.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not in their best interest. Maybe they need the humbling all the way to the finish line because they clearly have. Again, going back to
I do think Ricky Pearsall needs to have like a regular offense where they're not throwing the ball 11 times and it's not bad weather. Like I do think he needs to be involved because I think he's like, because there's been 3 of these games where like this one was a snow game, last one they didn't throw the ball at all, and the other one he was like targeted twice. He's like being forgotten about and probably quietly criticized. Yeah, Pearsall falling and slipping was a bad look. Whatever. It's the turf.
I mean, Jawan Jennings had a decent enough game. He slipped every single play for the entire first half.
Yeah, I'm saying it's important to get him in the offense and involved and have an understanding, build his confidence up, because that's a guy you're betting on next year. Yeah, there's a little bit of that. I also think they're cooked either way. So how much does it matter?
Okay, so let's talk about one thing about next year that I think can go right on to. We can throw this log on the fire right now. Okay. Let's leave the Purdy aspect out of this. I think Purdy has a lot to play for in the final few games. I think they're signing him no matter what. I don't necessarily agree with that because I see no fiscal downside to waiting as long as you can. I would apply this to almost anybody.
The question is, though, if he holds out and he doesn't play, what do you do?
Let him decide. If he wants to hold out, that's great. Why not? Yeah. By the way, I hear this a lot. Oh, they should go get Belichick. Belichick ain't fixing this defense, and he sure as fuck ain't fixing the offense. And oh, by the way, Belichick, such a great drafter. You should check out what they got going on in New England. Look at the slate he left them with. This idea that you know what Belichick had? Tom fucking Brady in a different era of football. It's been years since Belichick has been the guy that you want leading your team. Much like Deebo Samuel and so many other of the 49ers, he's aged out. So go ahead and get Belichick. Watch how that goes. Meanwhile, you'll have 25 other teams being like, oh, Kyle Shanahan's available? Sick. That might work out for Kyle. Here's the player I want to talk about. This is now the second or third time, don't have it off the top of my head, that Jair Brown has been made the target of the game. The Jets really enjoyed going after him in week 1. The Bills made it their mission to put this young man in a blender, and he did very little, if anything, to stop them. His run fits tonight were atrocious.
I'm worried about him as a player.
Especially, too, when you compare him to Mustafa, who I thought was outstanding tonight. Not perfect, but outstanding. And a bright spot on a defense that had roughly one bright spot.
He's like the only guy that's bringing any juice week after week.
Right. And the irony is the first play of the game, D. Winters, juice. Second, third play of the game, juice. They look sick. If you draft Drew Aller in the first round, I storm the building. I'm telling you, Frederick. Drew Aller is not going to go on the first 2 days of the draft. First off, I don't even think he's going into the draft. There's no way. He runs a 4.9 40. You might as well draft Nussmeier out of LSU, who's slow as shit. He's a strictly pocket quarterback who's an underclassman. He ain't going anywhere. They're not even playing him full-time at Penn State. Sorry.
I do think that brings up a point of one way you could buy leverage. It's psychotic, but you say you actually do the thing of what they did with Pearsall, which hasn't quite worked out this year. But you say
that was the plan.
All right, Brock, you want to get paid? You didn't show us enough last year for us to pay you confidently. You're still the starter. But we are going to take a quarterback in round 3 with our extra third-round pick. We're going to do it.
I'm so easily trolled about quarterback. So I'm an easy mark. No, you're right. And they absolutely need another quarterback. By the way,
the Bill Barnwell thing, right? That like front offices don't want to do it because it's like putting yourself out there when you do the starter. But you could theoretically draft another quarterback, say, Brock, you got one more year. You prove it, we'll extend you.
If anyone should know that having 2 quarterbacks that you feel comfortable starting is a good idea, it's Kyle Shanahan. Because not only is that been the case in San Francisco, but I also think back to, I don't know, a certain team in Washington that drafted Kirk Cousins a couple of rounds after they drafted Robert Griffin III. That worked out. That was Kyle's favorite quarterback. Again, it's not the QB, it's the scheme. The QB got MVP votes in the same fucking scheme last year. So clearly it's not just the scheme, and clearly it's not just the QB, and everyone's eating it a little bit here. Like everybody is out here with plenty of blame. And I do agree that the league has caught up to Shanahan. He has not thrown any interesting wrinkles or stuff because he doesn't have cool players. And ultimately, I'm not going to be able to tell you that Shanahan sucks or not at this because I have a great track record of him not sucking, objectively being awesome at this for years, except for a year when his entire team is in a constant state of injury, entitlement, and nonsense. A season that has never really gotten started. And the easiest thing to do is just say, get rid of the head coach, right? Oh, just clear everything out. I would remind you all that if you get rid of Kyle, you burn this entire thing to the ground. And you were at 5-7, that might seem A-okay to you, but you're a 5-7 team that's coming off of a Super Bowl berth last year. And you want to just burn it to the ground? For whom? Do you know if Ben Johnson's actually good at being a head coach? Or does he just have sick-ass players in Detroit? You know?
It's a great question.
The idea that, I'm just a clown. Get out of the chat then. You don't have to
are a
hang
clown.
around. I am kind of a clown. What, am I funny? I amuse you?
Yeah, I would.
Milroe, I mean, we're talking Jalen Milroe might be Trey Lance 2.0. They all might be Trey Lance 2.0.
I would say the Kirk Cousins thing would be awesome full circle of them just going, all right, we're going to bring in Kirk and pay him 27.5 next year to be the backup, or Atlanta eats more of it. I would love it.
Jeff's coming in and saying you want to hire Steve Spagnuolo as the head coach. Good luck with the innovation on offense that you're all looking for with Steve Spagnuolo as the head coach. Like, I just want to have a removed objective conversation. This team played in the Super Bowl last year. Do you think Kyle Shanahan do you think he was a good head coach last year? Do you think he was a good play caller last year? Do you think that he suddenly forgot how to do all of that stuff? I agree. There is a level of the league catching up, and Kyle's running. I'll be very blunt. I'll be very blunt about this. Kyle runs an offense built to beat cover 3. And he runs a defense that's a cover 3. He wants to play a cover 3 defense. It's a cover 4 league. It's a cover 2 league. The league is all about too high. So I agree very much that the league has somewhat passed him by. And yet I could have said the same thing last year, and the team played in the Super Bowl and was in overtime. So the idea that he didn't lose any. Who did he lose as a coach this past year?
Kubiak.
Did we notice that Clint Kubiak was gone until like week 2 of this year?
I mean, I did because
because
I'm a sicko. But
I'm just saying, like, if it was all held together by one of the Kubiaks, I kind of have a hard time believing that. I did believe it when McDaniel left, because I have had Kyle have a legitimate conversation when he drops the bullshit for 5 minutes and have a legitimate conversation about how that guy is really important to me. That's why Kyle has given him so many chances. That's why he kept pushing for him, because he's like, that guy was my right-hand man. That guy had a fundamental understanding of how I thought, and he's probably the only guy that Kyle trusted to call him out on his bullshit, of which he has ample amount, as we all do. They might be getting him back, I'm just saying. And now suddenly everything's A-okay again. I just don't think that a guy who was objectively, I'm really emphasizing that word because it's easy to forget now, but there's nobody on the planet in February who thought that Kyle Shanahan was a shitty head coach and a shitty offensive play caller. And now on December 1, he has to go. Like, yeah, it's a mess. But this is Kyle Shanahan's mess to fix for at least the next couple of years. And it would have to be pretty disastrous this time next year to be having a different conversation.
Yeah, and I think the offense, a lot of it was like, it was working. It was just not working in the red zone, and they would have a lack of execution at key moments where it's like, if you don't have a holding penalty, which goes on the head coach, but like the offense did function at a high level, like still, if you go to some of the EPA stats, still functional at a high level.
Yeah. Even today, they're in Buffalo's territory every time. He gets a long leash. We're not even through one shitty year yet.
Why are you going at everybody?
Sorry.
Listen. So I think the reality is they had a lot of things that went wrong that were, in key situations with the offense, right? I think Kyle should be criticized for the way they handle protections and Hutch and all that boring shit, right?
Yep.
That stuff we've broken down, and that's what we've talked about. I do think personnel is probably the number one thing on this roster, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you drafted like shit for 3 years and you didn't build up a lot of depth where you don't have guys aging into key positions. You drafted Cam Latu in the 3rd round who's gone. You don't have a backup tight end. Cam Latu is a guy who I thought was barely draftable. I'll say it forever. You drafted him in the third round. You drafted Ty Davis-Price in the third round. You drafted Trey Sermon in the third round. Ambry Thomas, who's like arguably the best out of that group. You drafted a kicker who, honestly, I thought was a reasonable pick because he was the best kicker available. And you put yourself in a situation where you just hated Robbie Gould so much. You said anything else, got it, anything else. And so you made a lot of mistakes there with personnel. And now you're in a situation where you don't have depth on special teams. You got guys that are just a mess. And so you haven't had guys age into any of this stuff. So this is where you're at, where you missed on quite a few picks. You don't have a lot of answers at key positions. It's worn down. And Kyle is pretty rigid and is not great at adapting stuff when he does have a piece go down, which is one of the reasons it's fair to criticize him. It's also hard to adapt when you build your offense around, like one player. Kyle probably should be better at adapting. I think that's something to rip him for, no question. Yep. I do think his team needs
I don't know
an offseason.
I don't know how anyone's watching the film of Deebo Samuel and saying, let's give this guy touches.
No.
Not more touches. Touches. There's nothing there. The fact that they're using him as a kick returner and gives some indication that they're like, well, we got to figure out something to do with this fucking guy. We just re-signed him. So there's that. I will note now, we talk all the time about how bad the drafts have been. 2023 currently has no players worth the second contract. It used to be one. It used to be Jair Brown. I got to take him off the list. Renardo Green, Dominic Pooney, Malik Mustafa. Looking good. Pearsall, on watch.
We'll see.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Right now, it's like Ricky Pearsall, fifth-year option in a couple of years. Like, obviously not. But there's a lot of time. But this draft looks good.
Again, a guy who was shot and didn't have training camp or anything.
I'm going to give him the
if he's
benefit
hurt,
of the doubt.
That's a problem.
Next year's going to be weird for him, too. I don't know what happens with Debo. I don't know when Ayuk comes back. Juwan Jennings deserves to be the starting X receiver on this team next year. So is Pearsall, who I think always profiled better as an X. Now they're playing him a lot, only pretty much primarily as the Z. Like, is that something that he's viable at? Can he go into the flanker spot and be a true third wide receiver? I agree. Way too early to fully judge, especially considering the circumstances, but
fair.
It hasn't been great. It hasn't been great. He has not been getting open the last couple of weeks.
We'll see. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that.
Okay. And then 22, they have one guy. It's Purdy.
Yeah.
You can't have three drafts where you've given out, or there's one guy who's worth a second contract. One guy. Because I wouldn't give Talanoa Hufanga a second contract. You can't give Elijah Mitchell a second contract. Maybe you give Jalen Moore another contract, because at this point, why the fuck not? Banks, can't do that. Trey Sermon and Trey Lance are already gone, so is Ambry Thomas. Is Ambry Thomas gone, or is he just hanging out?
He is technically on the roster on IR.
That's fun. So you went 21, 22, 23. You have two players. Two players in three drafts. Now you're playing some of the other guys, but you have two players from three drafts, Lenore and Purdy. If you're wondering why everything looks so bad, it really doesn't have to be more complicated than that. Two players, three drafts. So, and I don't know what, the kicker is, do you take a hard reset? Do you treat next year like the Rams treated 2023? Because it's not as if the Rams have just sort of taken it to another level now, right? Because they still have a lot of old aging guys, and they're like, okay, so we're going to hard reset our defense. Well, that's working out okay, but they're still trying to figure it out on offense. They spent money in the wrong spaces there. They have two great receivers, but none of them can be on the field at the same time, it seems, because of injuries. Don't have a good tight end anymore. And then, your quarterback is, get this, hit or miss, and a lot more miss than hit than he used to be, because he's always been a swashbuckler. You got a sick-ass running back, but that's a 6-6 football team. The Rams are eminently average. I guess their arrow's pointing up, but it's only because they allowed it to point down for so long, which is a full year.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the reality is this team is just not very good.
No.
They're a top-heavy roster with a lot of injuries at the top of the roster. Did not replace anything very well in the middle of the roster, and once you get to the middle of the roster, it's not great. And you've got a young coordinator on defense who you don't fully trust and hasn't really shown any wrinkles that get you excited. Special teams is about that depth, and they don't have that depth.
Yeah.
And then your offense has been unable to click for a variety of reasons.
I mean, what was the one thing that we made? And it's not as if we're, geniuses at this or anything. Like, the one thing that we were abundantly clear on is that the offense had to put up 30 points. Brock Purdy got 94 passing yards. By the way, Josh Allen, 148, threw one to himself. Both teams ran the shit out of the ball. And this offense, they scored 10 points. They didn't score until McCaffrey was already gone and the game was over.
They did have some pretty sick fumbles, though.
They did, and yet missed the best opportunity for the sickest one yet. I know there's, me being a fool looking at the chat. The more we get, Jake, the dumber I'm going to end up being here. Debo's, trade bait or trading Debo. Nope, missed your window. Like with so many other things, this team missed their window. They thought it would be one more year, and it isn't.
They had to pick. They had to pick Debo or Ayuk, and they chose both and Ricky Pearsall, and everyone went, okay. And they're like, we're smarter than you.
We have so many options.
And Pearsall being shot obviously was a massive factor in that. So,
yeah. I don't, he got shot after it was already settled.
That's true. Actually, that's true. You're right.
I think if anyone if a head has to roll, I think it'll be Sorensen. But if a head has to roll, I think you go Lynch.
It's hard after this draft, though.
It's not hard after the three prior.
Fair.
I mean, and there are other conversations to be had about other players that you might be able to trade. I think that there's a conversation to be had if someone wants to give you a Godfather offer for Purdy, you might take it. I'm not sure who else is there. Mr. Joe, who is the star of the night.
The New York football Jets?
He's saying Wilkes is laughing his ass off. From where?
North Carolina.
Just hanging out.
Smoking a cigar on the front porch. I mean, living life.
To be fair, sounds a lot better. Probably would prefer getting millions of dollars a year to coordinate a defense. He doesn't have another coaching job, and I'm sure he's looking for one. Rodgers for Purdy, 1-for-1, everyone loses. It's called a suicide pact.
I love it.
I got nothing. I got nothing left on this team.
Yeah, I'm with you. We will get back at it this week. And
I mean, what are we even going to break down on film?
Caleb Williams. Oh, on Tuesday.
Yeah,
I don't know. Where I'm at health wise, I can give you a detailed report.
Been there, buddy. Been there. All right, Jake's going to heal up. I'm going to calm down. We'll talk to you on Tuesday, y'all.
Appreciate you, folks.